Have you ever like thought about how your brain is actually like floating?
Floating.
Yeah, not floating in some like philosophical way. I mean, literally, like suspended in fluid inside your skull.
Oh, right. Cerebrospinal fluid.
Exactly, CSF. And today, we are going to deep dive into this YouTube video that makes some, well, pretty bold connections between CSF, the third eye,
Oh, wow.
Kundalini energy, even spiritual awakening.
That's it's definitely where like scientific understanding kind of, intersects with some of those more out there ideas.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we're going to break down the claims that this video makes, but, we're keeping our feet firmly planted in, like, actual science, you know what I mean?
Right,
Because
right.
some of this stuff is, well, pretty far out there.
It can be, yeah.
But the science behind CSF itself, that is really fascinating.
Yeah, it really is.
So, okay, let's back up a little bit. What is cerebrospinal fluid?
Well, it's, as the video explains, it's this clear fluid that surrounds your brain and your spinal cord. And it basically provides cushioning. It delivers nutrients. You could almost think of it like I guess, like a really specialized shock absorber and like a life support system all rolled into one.
And the video really, like, leans into that visual of the brain actually floating.
Right. And that's not just like, a metaphor or anything. The human brain, it weighs about 1,400 grams.
Wow.
But thanks to the CSF, it actually effectively only weighs about 50 grams.
No way.
Yeah, it's a huge reduction in weight. And it's a really big deal in protecting the brain from, impacts and stuff.
So I'm picturing, like, those buoyancy experiments you do in, like, science class.
Yeah.
It's like that, but inside our heads 24/7.
Exactly. And another thing that's pretty amazing is that CSF, it actually develops from amniotic fluid, the stuff that surrounds us in the womb.
Oh, wow.
So you're literally, bathed in this fluid from like the very beginning of your development.
So it's like not just protecting our brains, fully formed, but it's been with us since like the very beginning.
Literally, yeah. And the video, it talks about this thing called the choroid plexus. It's this specific structure, and it's responsible for producing CSF.
Okay.
And because it's relatively large, that suggests it plays a pretty important role.
Makes sense.
But the video, it goes beyond just, the basic biology of CSF.
Okay.
It suggests that it could be even more than just, a protective cushion.
More than just a cushion.
Yeah, it kind of puts forward this intriguing idea that CSF might actually act as a carrier of information and even energy within the brain.
Whoa. Okay. So like almost a liquid communication network.
Yeah, like an internal internet for the brain.
I'm not sure I'm following. How would that even work?
Well, the video uses this analogy of flower remedies. You know how water is supposed to hold like the essence of the plant?
Okay. Yeah.
So they're suggesting that CSF might be working in a similar way, carrying information gleaned from light, sound, vibrations, even molecules.
So it's like our thoughts and experiences are somehow like imprinted on this fluid.
That's the idea. And then they go into like the anatomy of the brain, to try to explain how this information could be like transmitted and received.
Okay.
And they focus on specifically the ventricles.
The ventricles, those are those fluid-filled chambers in the brain, right?
Right. And the video shows these visuals of the ventricles like sending projections towards all these really important glands like the pineal gland, the pituitary gland.
Okay.
They also talk about these tiny hair-like structures that are like lining the ventricles. They're called cilia.
Oh, cilia, right. Those help circulate the CSF, don't they?
They do. They're like tiny little oars, moving the fluid around.
Okay.
But the video emphasizes that cilia, they also function like antenna, like they're picking up information from the CSF as it flows past. So they might be playing, a pretty key role in this, in this hypothetical information exchange.
Okay, I'm with you so far. And didn't we talk about CSF also contains melatonin and DMT?
Yes. And they're both actually derived from the same amino acid, tryptophan.
Right, tryptophan. Melatonin is the one that regulates sleep, right?
Exactly.
DMT, well, that's a whole other story.
Yeah, DMT is, it's a powerful psychedelic, often associated with, altered states of consciousness.
And the video, they suggest that CSS allows these substances to basically circulate really, really quickly throughout the brain, like essentially bypassing the normal neural pathway.
Right, like it's a faster, more direct route for those molecules to reach different parts of the brain.
Okay, so that's all pretty wild. But now we're getting into like the really, really controversial part.
Here we go.
Kundalini energy and CSF.
Right.
So walk us through this. What exactly does the video say about this?
Okay, well, this is where the video ventures into some, let's say, speculative territory. They describe Kundalini as this energy. It's located at the base of the spine.
Okay.
And it's said to, like, rise to the third eye during a spiritual awakening.
Hmm.
And the big claim that the video makes is that this awakening happens through the movement of CSF, not, through the nervous system like most people think.
That is a bold claim. So how do they even, like, try to back that up?
Well, they point to a few anatomical details, and they kind of interpret them in a way that, supports their hypothesis.
Okay.
For instance, they talk about the sacrum, which is the bone at the base of the spine, and it's where Kundalini is supposed to, like, reside.
Okay.
And they point out that sacrum literally translates to sacred bone.
But couldn't that just be, like, a coincidence?
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah.
They also focus on the filum terminale. It's this tiny, tiny little filament, and it connects the spinal cord to the coccyx.
Uh-huh.
And then there's a central canal that runs right through the spinal cord. And importantly, it's filled with CSF.
So they're suggesting there is this, like, physical pathway for CSF to travel from the base of the spine up to the brain.
Right, and then they bring in this whole other concept, Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. These are energy channels from yogic traditions.
I'm not familiar with those. Can you give us a little, like, background?
Sure. So in yogic philosophy, Ida and Pingala are these two spiraling energy channels. They intertwine along the spine.
Okay.
And then Sushumna, that's the central channel. It runs straight up the middle.
Okay.
And they're said to, govern different aspects of our being. And when they're in balance, that's supposed to be essential for, well-being.
Gotcha. So how does this all, like, tie into CSF?
Well, they suggest that there's a correspondence between these channels and certain, anatomical structures. Like Ida and Pingala, they say, represent the pineal and pituitary glands. And then Sushumna, the central channel, corresponds to the central canal in the spinal cord, which, as we said, is filled with CSF.
So they're mapping these, like, ancient energetic concepts onto the physical structures of the spine and the brain. And CSF is, like, the key, the conduit for this energy to flow.
Exactly.
Okay.
And get this, they say that the third ventricle in the brain, that's where all these channels supposedly meet, and they call it the birthplace of the INM.
Whoa. That's quite an interpretation.
It is, yeah.
But okay, before we get too far into the, the mystical stuff, let's bring it back to science a little bit.
Okay.
What does the video say about, like, actually influencing the CSF flow?
So they actually have this whole list of things that they say can impact CSF movement. Things like breath work, meditation, craniosacral therapy,
Right.
Different movement practices, sound and light therapy, and even, like, the power of intention.
Whoa, that's a pretty diverse list. Is there any science to back any of that up?
Well, they do highlight one study, and this study showed a direct link between breath work and changes in CSF flow in the third ventricle.
Interesting. So there is some evidence that, like, conscious breathing can actually change how the CSF moves.
Right.
Yeah.
And they suggest that this movement of CSF could be connected to this concept of, like, cosmic consciousness spreading through the brain.
Okay, now that's getting a little out there.
It is.
Anything else? Any other scientific nuggets in there?
Yeah, they also talk about CSF's connection to seawater, which is pretty interesting.
Ewar.
They're drawing a parallel between, the fluid that's in us and, like, the vastness of the ocean.
So we're all carrying a bit of the ocean inside of us.
That's the idea.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
It is, yeah. And it kind of makes you think about, how we might be connected to, like, something bigger than ourselves through this shared fluid.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really makes you think. And, even though the video paints this, like, really compelling picture, we got to remember that not every single thing they're saying is, like, backed up by hardcore scientific evidence.
Right. Like the whole CSF carrying, cosmic consciousness thing.
Yeah.
That's definitely getting into more of the speculative realm for sure.
Yeah, exactly. But even if we, like, set aside those more mystical interpretations for a sec, the science behind CSF just by itself is, like, totally fascinating.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, this fluid, it's been with us since, like, literally before we were born. Constantly circulating, protecting our brains, and maybe even, influencing our consciousness in ways that we're just starting to kind of figure out.
It really is amazing. And it just shows how much we still don't know about, the brain and how it all works. We always focus so much on those electrical signals, like zipping between neurons.
Right.
But, maybe we've been kind of overlooking this whole other level of communication.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Like maybe it's happening through this fluid medium.
Oh, that's a really cool way to put it.
Yeah, so like a hidden language inside us, a language of like fluids and vibrations.
I love that.
And this video, even if we, take some of it with a grain of salt, it really does a great job of like sparking our curiosity, making us wonder about all the possibilities.
For sure. It makes you think about what's going on inside your own head totally differently.
Yeah.
It also makes me think about all those practices they talked about, like breath work and meditation.
Yeah.
Do you think those could actually be influencing CSF flow and in turn, our state of mind?
It's an interesting thought.
Have you ever tried like any of that stuff yourself?
Oh, yeah. I've dabbled in both breathwork and meditation over the years, and honestly, they're both like incredibly powerful tools just for shifting my mental and emotional state. I mean, I
Right.
don't know if they're, directly messing with CSF flow or if it's something else entirely,
Yeah.
but the impact is definitely real.
That's really interesting. It also makes me wonder about those ancient yogic traditions, the ones talking about Kundalini energy and those like subtle channels. Maybe they were like onto something, even if they didn't have, the scientific language to describe it the way we do now.
Right. I mean, think about it. These traditions, they've been around for centuries, passed down through like generations of practitioners.
Yeah.
And all those people, they were like observing the effects of these practices on their minds and bodies.
Right.
Maybe they didn't have fancy brain scans or fMRIs or whatever, but they were paying attention, they were keen observers of their own experiences.
That's a good point. So maybe, whether it's directly through like messing with CSF or through some other process, maybe there are ways to tap into these like deeper states of consciousness, the same ones those traditions have been exploring for like forever.
That's what I find so fascinating about this whole topic. It's like it blurs the lines between like science and spirituality,
Right.
the physical and the metaphysical. It's like a challenge to expand, how we think about what's even possible and to consider perspectives that we might not normally think about, the ones that seem kind of outside the box of, conventional science.
Totally. And it just makes you wonder about the connection between, our inner world and the outer world.
Yeah.
That thing the video said about CSF being connected to seawater,
Uh-huh.
that's such a strong image, Like we carry a piece of the ocean inside us, this vast, mysterious thing.
And just like the human brain, the ocean is still largely unexplored. Who knows what secrets they both hold, right? Maybe by trying to understand one, we can get some clues about the other.
Whoa! That's such a fascinating thought. It's like this crazy feedback loop between like the microcosm and the macrocosm.
Exactly, the inner and the outer. It's a reminder that even now, with all this crazy scientific progress, there's still so much we don't know about ourselves and the universe.
And maybe that's like a good thing. It keeps things interesting, right?
Absolutely. It fuels our curiosity, our desire to explore and learn, to push those boundaries of knowledge. And maybe, just maybe, in the process, we'll figure out that the answers we've been looking for, they've been inside us the whole time.
That's amazing. So we covered a lot of ground, from like the nuts and bolts of CSF to these more esoteric ideas about its role in, spiritual awakening and all that.
Yeah.
So what do you think is like the most important thing to take away from this whole deep dive?
For me, it's the idea that CSF is maybe like more than just a protector for the brain. Like it could be a major player in consciousness itself.
Right.
A way for information and energy to be transmitted in ways we haven't even wrapped our heads around yet.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. It's like we've been staring at the hardware of the brain this whole time, the neurons and all that.
Yeah.
But we've totally missed the software, the fluid that's bathing and feeding it.
Right.
And maybe that's what's carrying information and coordinating everything, maybe in ways we haven't even imagined yet.
And to think that, maybe we can actually influence this fluid, our own little inner ocean, with things like breath work, it's pretty exciting and kind of empowering, too.
Yeah,
It's like we have more control over what's going on inside than we think.
totally. Which brings us back to that big question.
Yeah.
What even is consciousness? Is it all just like neurons firing, or is there more to it?
Yeah.
Something like flowing through us, connecting us all, connecting us to like the universe even. Things we're just barely starting to understand.
It's the question, right? The one philosophers and scientists have been trying to figure out forever. And this video, even with some of its, more far out interpretations, it really adds another layer to the whole discussion.
And maybe it's not even about finding the, perfect answer. Maybe it's about, being okay with the mystery, being open to the possibility that there's just more to reality than we can see, more to ourselves than we even get right now.
I love that. It's about keeping that sense of wonder and curiosity alive, being ready to be surprised by what we might find when we really explore who we are.
Yeah. So instead of getting all hung up on proving or disproving every little thing,
Yeah.
maybe the real takeaway here is to explore these ideas ourselves,
Right.
to see how they feel, how they fit with our own experiences. Just use them to open up our minds to what might be possible.
Totally agree. Sometimes the most amazing journeys start with just a question.
Yeah.
That little spark of curiosity, that willingness to go beyond what we already know. And who knows, maybe by following that thread, by going deeper into CSF and consciousness and all that, we might stumble upon some truths that have been there all along, just waiting for us.
So well said. And speaking of journeys, the video ends by talking about, that connection between CSF and seawater. Brings us back to that idea of carrying the ocean inside us. What do you think they were getting at with that?
I think it's about how connected we all are, not just to each other, but to the whole planet. Remember how life on Earth started in the oceans?
Right.
CSF, in a lot of ways, it's still carrying that ancient legacy. It's almost like we're all swimming in this massive ocean of consciousness.
Yeah.
All connected through, that shared fluid.
That's such a powerful image, like a cosmic suit that connects everything.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes you wonder if, by tuning into our own, inner ocean, if that's a way to tap into this, deeper sense of empathy, understanding, recognizing that we all come from the same place.
That's a beautiful thought. And it connects to that idea we were talking about, how meditation and breath work, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't just change our own minds, but maybe they send out ripples,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
affecting the world around us.
Like a butterfly effect, but for consciousness.
Exactly.
A tiny shift inside us can create this huge change, radiating out like waves in the ocean.
And those waves, they might be subtle, but they can reach the shore eventually.
Right.
Making a real difference in the world. It reminds us that, what's happening inside us and what's happening out there, they're not separate.
Totally.
They're connected.
So everyone listening, as you go about your day today, try to remember that ocean you're carrying around. Feel it, the rhythm, the ebb and flow. See if you can connect with that feeling of being part of something bigger, part of that web of life that connects every single one of us.
Maybe by exploring that inner ocean, by diving into CSF and consciousness and all that, you'll find this whole hidden world. A world of, wonder and potential just waiting to be unlocked.
And hey, maybe you'll find the answers you've been searching for have been inside you this whole time. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time, keep exploring.